Melanie Hempe. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Would you like to start by just introducing yourself and your work?
Yeah, for sure. So, my name is Melanie Hempe, and I am a registered nurse by trade. And what happened to us and our family was with our four children, our oldest child, our oldest son, became very addicted to video games right under our nose, and we had no idea what was happening. And it started in middle school, and he started playing a whole lot. And then he wasn't coming to dinner and he wasn't coming to family get togethers and couldn't figure out what was happening. And we went through his whole high school season with even more problems. When the school gave him a laptop, he started playing more games during school, but he had straight A's. So I was really confused and I didn't understand what was happening. But when he went to college is when we actually learned that he had a gaming addiction. He ended up dropping out. When I picked him up on that last semester, looked like he was on drugs. I asked him if he was on drugs and I just said, Adam, what in the world is going on? And he said, Mom, it's the video game. It did something to me. And I've been in bed for a week. I haven't eaten. I haven't gone to classes and I'm dropping out of school. So that was the thing that happened in our family that really woke us up to this thing called screen addiction in kids. And I went back then to a lot of the neuroscientists that I knew and went to a lot of conferences and I started learning about dopamine and the brain and especially the young brain. So I turned to my younger three kids at that point, my husband and I said, okay, we did one experiment. It did not work out very well. So we're not doing that experiment on y'all. We're going to actually have a screen strong home. And what that means is you're not going to have video games or social media on a smartphone all the way through high school. So it worked really well. We applied all the medical science that I was learning to our own family at that point and had quite a different experience. And so I was being asked to speak to a lot of schools in different community groups. And that's how ScreenStrong got started. We are a nonprofit organization and we educate parents on the medical science around screen overuse. We are not an anti-screen organization by any means, but we want parents to understand the screen overuse signs and symptoms that I missed obviously when I was raising, we were raising our first child, and then also prevent, right? To prevent screen addiction and then to reverse. So if you have a child who's really struggling, we have very practical steps to help reverse that and get your kids back. So we are all about education and we're all about community and getting like-minded families together so they can help each other and support each other through this really difficult chapter of parenting that we're dealing with right now.
Can you share some of those practical steps with us?
So, the practical steps for taking your kids' screen away or the practical steps for not giving it to them at the beginning? We've got we've got both. So, the practical steps for preventing screen addiction is of course to delay the use of certain toxic screens. And those screen uses include video games, social media and smartphones, and pornography. So those are the three areas that we deal with the most. And our solutions are very scientifically based and medical evidence around what you do when you're dealing with an addictive activity is you limit access. So we limit access to screens in general. Our kids aren't allowed to watch TV all day, even if it's a baseball game. We watch family movies, we watch documentaries, but we don't allow the certain toxic screen uses. So one of the practical things that you do is get your child a basic phone, a phone that is not connected to the internet. Another practical thing is to help them understand what to do with their downtime and replace that downtime that is normally being spent on a screen with other type of hobbies and activities that they can do. And you've got to do this really young. It helps. We can certainly help you if you have a child who is in middle school, for example, and now they're playing Fortnite for 5 hours every day. What do you do with that? We've got a whole detox thing that you can go through. But generally, the practical steps are around reducing the amount of access. We recommend no smartphones all the way through the 48 months of high school. Kids do so much better without it. Their mental health is so much better. They are not distracted in school. less anxious, more calm. So that practical step of just using a basic phone, which is fine. It can talk and text, but it does not have the internet connection, in their pocket for 24 hours a day. That's a huge practical step. And another practical step, and I have many, but another one that I'll just suggest right now is to be more mindful around having social activities at your house, in your own home, and planning things for your kids' friends. We got in the habit of every Friday or Saturday night, our younger kids had their friends over. I did lots of cooking food for teenagers, which was by far a much better problem to have than dealing with a screen addicted video gamer in my basement. So that worked out really well. Really just kind of, spending more time initially with your kids to teach them how to do life offline. And then it's sort of the gift that keeps giving, right? So once you teach them that it's okay not to spend all our time on entertainment screen media, then they fill their days, they fill their time, they fill their interest. Highly recommend that kids learn music. They can learn all kinds of music, depending on your budget, what you can spend on lessons. We did a lot of group lessons with some of the instruments. We taught them a lot about sports. So even if your child isn't athletic, they can still be involved in all kinds of intramural type activities, getting them outside a lot, just sort of shifting how you do life over to more real life instead of trying to limit a highly dopaminergic activity. It's much easier in the same way that if you have kids in your house and you give them donuts for dinner every night, then it's going to be kind of hard to start taking them all away. It's probably better not to buy the donuts if you don't want them to have the donuts. And then as they get a little more mature and their brain development matures and that frontal cortex is starting to get more fully connected, at the end of high school, they're going to be much more prepared to use it well, to use it in a balanced way.
What basic phone do you recommend?
We recommend the Gab phone just because we're very familiar with that. There's quite a few phones out there that are marketed for kids, but still allow a lot of apps. We kind of shy away from that. So with the Gab phone, we have a code with them. You use the code STRONG and you get a really good discount. But what it does is Gab is one of the only companies I think left where you can still actually get a super basic plan. And that means we recommend the plan that has no media sharing. So kids aren't sharing constant pictures back and forth with each other. We love that. And we love that especially for older kids. And it seems like with the phone world that we live in that we should be we should be giving them more access as they get older. And that is not true. A fifth grader, for example, uses a phone very different from a 16-year-old child. So we don't want to keep giving them more and more rope, right? We don't want to keep giving them more and more temptations. We also recommend Canopy, and we actually love that filter. We use that now. The kids use it now that they're in college. They have a phone. Of course, we didn't buy it for them because I don't buy phones. I don't buy smartphones for kids, regardless how old they are. But Canopy is a wonderful filter that we have on all of our computers in our house and all of our phones. So that's really a cool thing. But I just recently found out that actually Verizon does have a flip phone now back in their offering. And so it's a flip phone that is not connected to the internet. They have the same model that is connected to the internet, but we recommend the one that is not connected to the internet. And you know what? These vintage flip phones are actually making a little bit of a comeback because kids are tired and they're exhausted over their entire world being consumed by, all the notifications and all the things with social media. So I think we've come a long way. I think we've come a long way in our culture that it's really kind of cool not to have a smartphone anymore.
What do you like about Canopy over other filtering apps or software?
Right. So I really like Canopy. And again, we have a code strong to use with them. And I have done so much research on this. We have had all the things in our house. I've done a lot. Canopy acts like a VPN. So everything that comes to your phone is filtered through. But what's really cool is the thing that I haven't been able to find with other companies is that Canopy actually blocks the image and whatnot content before it gets to your device. So there's a lot of filters that actually the images all come into the device and then it alerts the parents afterwards, hey, this is the stuff that your kid just saw. That's not really appropriate. We don't want our kids to see, the images. So it actually is really, really cool. On our website, under our resources, you can see a sample, and it has like a white box over the image. So my older boys love it. They just say, Mom, this is great ever, because it blocks everything, that you have designated for it to block as far as sexual images. But then you can also, with Canopy, and this is what we did with them and what they really asked us to do. We blocked all the websites and all the apps, and then we just allow back a few that they need for day-to-day stuff, like their banking app and different things like that. So we really love it so far. Like I said, a lot of the other things that we tried, typically what I do is I give it to an 8th grader, and if they can break it, then we don't recommend it. So, and they've all been broken. Canopy is the one that we feel like is pretty strong.
Prevention is so much easier, more effective than treatment.
Yeah.
So if you're thinking about prevention, what age group of kids, parents, do you want to talk to?
Wow. I want to get to them in 1st grade. So we actually have a Kids Brains and Screens course that we came out with for middle school, which is great, from 5th grade and up. So I love that age group too. But if I'm going to get my pick, I would love to talk to the 1st grade, 2nd grade, 3rd grade parents. That's when you're starting to really make some decisions that change the trajectory of where your kids are headed. And what I mean by that is, there's a lot of parents that love iPads, for example, or tablets, and they feel like there's a lot of good things on those devices, and they need to be educated early on that a tablet is just like a phone. It's connected to the internet. It has all the apps. You can, there's some weird thing in our culture that parents feel like tablets are okay for toddlers. I don't know who invented that idea, because even Steve Jobs wouldn't give a tablet to his own kids. But I want to educate them about the brain development and all the things that we wish we had known, right, before we made so many mistakes. And I've made so many mistakes. We do not judge at all, parents that are in the trap and that are caught in the quicksand, because I know exactly what what it feels like. But what we do want to do is educate them. And so there is a lot about brain development that is really important to understand when your kids are young, that all the things that they do, the good things and the bad things, are changing their brain. So, our brain can be really changed to crave good rewards, and our brain can be changed, especially at that age, to crave bad rewards. So there's all kinds of rewards, and we need to keep as many good rewards in their life as possible. And those are things that are found through spending time with people, making eye contact, playing outside in the backyard, creating, doing art, doing music, all those things. Kids can get a lot of good dopamine, a lot of good rewards. And that's what we need to focus on, because the dopamine pathway is changing every time they're on a screen. Those dopamine connections, the dendrites all in that reward center, are getting longer, they're getting bigger, and it's permanent changes. And so, Lembke, in her book, Dopamine Nation, she explains this really well, how these changes are happening. The younger that your child is exposed to an addiction, the worse it's going to be later. Just like the good things that your child is exposed to when they're young, the better it's going to be later. And it's because their brain is so changeable. And this happens really all the way through adolescence. It's very easy for children to learn foreign languages, for example, when they're younger. And that is right in line with the brain development that says, we have all these connections that we're using, and the ones that we don't use early on are going to get pruned away. So it's a harder task to learn a foreign language much later, in the teen years. It's much easier when you're younger. So that works both ways. So the prevention for parents when they have younger kids, it's so critical for them to understand this information so they can parent accordingly. It is not an opinion. It's not like, oh, we get to pick a different fun opinion to believe and get real emotional about. It's not. It's just the facts around science and around brain development. So who would have known that we would have all had to become little neuroscientists to raise our kids? But, a few generations ago, our parents did it all right and they didn't even know they were doing it right. But, they opened the back door at, after breakfast and said, we'll see you at dinner. And that was really very helpful for kids to get out and play and learn how to resolve conflicts and learn how to be creative and invent games and work out situations with their friends. Their brains look very different than they do when they're on a screen all day. So that's a huge prevention tip. And that's why I love talking to young families to get it started.
You had mentioned an author and book in there. I missed it. Do you recall what that was?
Anna Lembke, MD, Anna Lembke, and her book was Dopamine Nation. And it was a New York Times bestseller. Actually explains all the science behind addiction. And, she talks in there a lot about gaming and social media as well, because it all, the same area of the brain is affected by all addictions, whether it's drugs, alcohol, gambling, shopping, pornography, video gaming, social media. It activates the same area of the brain. And that's what I did not understand, that when we were raising our first child, I had no idea that I was setting him up for an addictive brain. And I know now what happened, and it's really kind of sad because I didn't understand, like any process addiction, like gambling, right? It's very addictive. And I didn't understand that video games fell in that same category. And of course, now we know that social media and smartphones do too. And we don't vilify the companies that make these things. Just like I am not going to go try to shut down big tobacco. I'm just going to suggest to my kids that they don't smoke because there's a lot of medical reasons behind smoking and it's not good for us. And Anna Lembke does compare it to smoking. It's very similar. The trend years ago was everyone smoked and we didn't know, but then we learned the science and now we know. And, it took a number of years, right? It took decades. And I'm hoping it doesn't take that long for parents to understand what screen addiction, is doing to their kids' brains. And it's not all bad, but it can become bad very quickly. And if you don't understand those warning signs, that they are having meltdowns when you unplug their game or take their phone away, or they're playing more over time, they are lying to you about, what they're doing on their screen, their relationships are suffering, their grades are going down, all these things where it's affecting their life in a negative way, that's how you know that probably they're on the track to getting a dependency that will lead to an addiction. And we know that with the younger a child gets an addiction, regardless of what kind of addiction it is, the higher the risk that there will be more addictions down the road. So 90% of all adult addictions start in the teenage years. And that is a mind-blowing statistic. So we want to keep our kids strong. We want to keep them getting the normal amount of dopamine from doing activities that create that, instead of activities that create this overload of dopamine that their brains can't handle.
You mentioned some program for fifth graders. Was that for the fifth graders themselves or for their parents? And can you describe that?
Right. So we have a Kids Brains and Screens is our series that we have. And it's a Kids Brains and Screens for parents. That's what we initially started with a number of years ago. And it is a deep dive into the brain development, all the things about, dopamine that we've been talking about, and the brain science around video games and smartphones and social media and pornography and all that. So we have that for parents. And then we created a version for kids because this was our most requested piece that we had, from all our parents. They want to know, how do I explain all this brain science to my kids and everything to do about screens? And so I love, for example, this in the beginning of this particular chapter. For example, we have a dopamine chart in here, and it's really interesting to explain to a fifth grader what's happening to your brain when you're on a screen versus when you're playing outside. So this is a course. It is for schools. but a lot of parents get it and they use it in their home. A lot of homeschools, hybrids, public schools, private schools use this now. The website is kidsbrainsandscreens.com. So we do have, like I said, we have a digital course for parents that hopefully we will be getting in print pretty soon. And then we have this course for kids, and it is in print. Thank goodness that they can actually sit down and work through the worksheets. And there's a little quiz at the end of every chapter. And then at the end of the book, we have a call to action for them to take a week off, to take 7 days, the 7-day challenge, and the whole class does it. And they take a week off of their video games and their phones, and they play outside, and they have a fun Friday, fun night at the end of the week where they kind of learn to be social, or at least have a chance to be social. So it's very successful, and we're thrilled to have it out by this Christmas. Hopefully we're going to have our K-3 version. We have a little book for K-3, and it's like a picture book, and it explains what's happening to your brain when you're on the screens, and it's super positive, but how to build a healthy brain, and then just the kinds of screen uses that you probably should stay away from, when you're little. So that's coming out as well. So we're super excited about this material because it has been very popular. And I feel like, in fifth grade, you can understand a lot. I feel like they should do it in fifth grade, and they need to do it again in eighth grade, because they're learning different things. But we have a whole chapter in here on how to be a friend, how to make a friend, and that social piece that is missing when we're on social media, for example. It's such a counterfeit way to be social. And so it's not all bad, but our kids have to learn how to be social first, the real way in person. And then they can learn to transfer that over to social media. But if they don't learn how to do it first, then they have problems. And that's where we see a lot of the mental health problems in our teen culture today, the crisis that we're in with anxiety and depression. It's very sad. And I feel like childhood has been skipped, and we need to fix it. And it starts with education. Every change has to start with education and then community. And that's why we have both of those things that we focus on our ScreenStrong.org is our nonprofit. And that's what we focus on. And so if you want to come in there's a free Connect forum. You can come in and join Connect and see some really cool webinars from teenagers that have grown up without social media and smartphones and video games. And then you can ask parents questions and just get help in there. So we're very big on the community piece. But we're not just talking about the problem. We're actually giving you the solution to do something about it with your kids.
In helping parents, what do you find your biggest challenges?
With talking to parents? Is that what you said?
Yeah, in convincing them. Yeah, in convincing them, or just telling them.
So I think that it's the myths, right? And I know the myths very well because I believed all of them. And I had blind spots. A lot of times parents just feel like their kid is different, and they feel like they've had lots of conversations. And so, their kids are fine because we have to make them more mature. And see, these are all parent blind spots. First of all, your kids are not different. They're very special. Their kids are kids, and a 16-year-old teen will do what every 16-year-old teen does on their phone. They are not. We cannot make our kids more mature. Our kids are very intelligent, but that has nothing to do with maturity, and that's a big miss for parents. And they feel like, I'm going to make my kid different. I'm going to make them more mature. I'm going to give them all my values. I'm going to tell them what to click on and what not to click on, and we're going to be good to go. And that is a huge blind spot. That is one of the biggest potholes that parents kind of fall into. So we need to be able to step away from our own bias, thinking our kids are never going to be that kid that does anything wrong. And we need to understand that it's not about their heart. It is about their brain. And we need to help them by not putting the temptations in their path. And even if it doesn't get into bad content, it is a huge waste of time for a teenager all day in school to be checking his social media. It's just a huge waste of time for a girl in a math class to be shopping for new bathing suits, right? It's too much of a temptation for them. So we have to come alongside them like any good coach does and take kind of our parenting hat off. And that, what I mean is kind of take that emotional thing away and start looking at this from a logical coaching lens. And if your team was losing, you know what you would do? You would get a new game plan. And the coach doesn't always ask the players what to do, right? So the coach knows, the coach does the research, the coach figures out, and the coach knows their team really well. And they know what needs to happen in order to change the direction if there's a problem on a team. And so when you get that mentality, that really helps. Another thing that parents really struggle with are the myths around that their child is going to be left out, their child won't have any friends, their child will be different, people will make fun of them. And that is a myth too. It's not true that your child will have more friends on social media. In fact, our research is saying that they have fewer friends on social media because they're all very shallow and no one really knows each other. Again, social media is fine for maintaining, figuring out when you're going to meet up to go to dinner, but it's not okay for kids who are in the beginning stages of learning how to be social. It doesn't work. And so, but a lot of parents get confused because they think, well, they're not going to have any friends. And the facts show that kids actually have deeper friendships with fewer people when they don't have the crutch of social media. So that's a big miss, that fear of missing out. And then parents also were very fearful of being like made fun of. You're the strict parent, or you're over controlling or whatnot. And actually what we've found is that parents tend to be way more over controlling when their child does have a phone, because now they're tracking their child. Now they're involved in every little piece of their life, minute to minute. And it becomes like a crutch for their child. So their child can't really become independent because they're constantly connected. So that's the pendulum on that side, and it needs to come back to center. We desperately need childhood back in our culture. We need them to be able to make their own decisions. When they're out, they don't need to text their mommy every time they are trying to decide what, flavor, yogurt to get when they're out. I mean, it's like kids are texting their mom all through school. We're really big on the phone free movement in schools. And this course goes very well with that movement because we're trying to teach kids why we don't need our phones during school, because we're here to learn. So parents have, they have a lot to deal with. And yet I think that the biggest struggles are centering around fear, and we have to get educated so we aren't so fearful. And the other struggle is around finding like-minded other parents in your like-minded community. So you can find 2 or 3 families that are going to delay this past high school and just say, hey, we are going to enjoy childhood. Yeah, our kids can have a flip phone. And if they need to call us, they can. We had so much success with our ScreenStrong families all over, not just my personal success, but so many thousands of families that have figured it out, that, you know what, this is so much easier, because you feel like your kids are going to be mad at you, or you're going to have a bad relationship if you don't give in to all this. And the fact of the matter is completely opposite. They're not mad at you. You're spending more time with them. And maybe for a few weeks, it's hard if you have to take it away and readjust, but that is your prerogative because you are the coach. And if a coach never changed the game plan, then they would never win. Like, so you have to be willing to look back and say, you know what, we did this way, didn't work out. We're going to try this. We're going to do this differently. And what we find is that kids really do want to spend more time with their parents and more time in relationship with them. They want their family unit to be strong, and anything that's really causing that much conflict, you know what, should be evaluated. And it's not forever. The ScreenStrong pathway really goes through high school. And then once they get to college, if they didn't grow up filling all their downtime on video games and smartphones, then they're probably going to be fine. The research says that a child does continue to repeat the things that they've done in childhood as they grow. So you're going to have an outlier case every now and then. You might say, oh, well, this kid binged and went crazy when he went to college. We don't see that at all. In all the years that I've been doing this, we see just the opposite. when kids do go to college and they don't have social media, mostly they get rounds of applause because their peers are like, my gosh, I wish I didn't have it either because, this generation is exhausted and they are anxious and stressed and depressed and it's tough. So it was really interesting. Last week, we took our youngest two back to college. And when we were helping unpack and all, one of their friends came running down the hall. They said, Mrs. Hempe, I got rid of TikTok and Instagram and Snap. It's really funny. I'm like, yay. And these are college kids. Like they're tired. They're really tired. So they have a lot of fun. Both of my boys were in leadership all through high school. They were the student body president, the class president. They didn't miss a beat. You know what? They still don't have social media. They're fine. They're fine. They maybe have to get it one day when they get a job somewhere, but I have full confidence that they'll know how to use it. Well,
How do parents build that community? Because I do think that is very important, and they feel alone. They feel like they're the only one.
the first thing that we did when our kids were in third grade, back after I realized I had to do something, was we had a book club. And I found a book, and right now a lot of parents are using this actually as their book club. And we actually met right after school, and there were 6 families, and all our kids were in the same grade, and the kids played on the playground, and we met in a room, and we actually discussed the book that we had at the time. It was fabulous. We all got on the same page at the same time. And then our kids played with each other all through middle school. It worked out really, really well. So that community, I think it's easier today than it was even back 5 and 6 years ago, because today there's so much more in the news and just in our culture. Like everybody's understanding that this is a problem and we need to do something. But you do have to get in person with your friends and your people and learn together and make some decisions. Now, a lot of people will say, 5th grade, they'll say, we're going to wait, through high school, but then by 7th grade, they give in, right? And it's usually because they have kind of gotten out of that community. So it is hard. There's no question. I do think it's getting easier, but if you've got even 2 or 3 friends that are choosing to just do a flip phone through high school and not even to have social media accounts for your kids, then it's easier. It's much easier. So I recommend starting with a book club. We have a program that be watching the site for. It's a ScreenStrong school program that we are giving a template for how to be like an ambassador of your school, where you can be the ScreenStrong mom, kind of like the room mom, but mom or dad, and plan social activities. So that's the other thing that we did that worked really well. And on the weekends, we had kids over at our house. We have a template for a Friday fun night. This is another really cool thing to do with your grade. It's a whole thing around getting everybody in the grade invited to a different house on a certain Friday night, and they played minute to win it games, and it's really fun. So we teach parents how to kind of do these social things, and then you find your people. But I will also say that if you don't find your people, that's okay too. It's a little bit harder. But when you teach your kids to be different, it's okay. It's okay. It's really not as hard as you think. And I know it feels like it's going to be harder, but I think it's harder for the parents, actually. I think the phone issue has a lot to do with the parents' feelings. From where I sit and what I've worked with families over the years, it's usually not the kids, it's the parents that are more fearful. The kids just want to spend time with each other. They just want to hang out. And they get their feelings hurt when their friends come over and they're on their phone all the time, right? So they kind of like not having to mess with it. I mean, think about it. Even you and I, our phones are exhausting. If I lost my phone for a week, that would be really cool. I would have a break. But I think that we're overestimating the fear or the pain with our kids. I think we got to look at ourselves. We're so scared our kids aren't going to be included. Included in what? When you think about that. My kids were left out of some things for sure, but they were things that I was fine with them being left out of. There was a lot of drama in middle school on group text. And we were they were left out of it. They heard about it, but they didn't have to go through the pain of being in it. And middle school kids can be really mean. And so that was kind of cool. My boys talk about that now, how they were so glad that they didn't have to go through all that. But at the time, they wanted a phone. There was a period of time there that we had to get through. But after what I had been through with my oldest son, I was like, guys, no, it just wasn't even an option. And that's the other big parenting mistake. If you constantly say, well, maybe next year, maybe next year, maybe next year, then they're constantly thinking, oh my gosh, one day my mom's going to give me a phone. At our house, we were like, guys, no, when you graduate, fine. But until then, no, the answer is no. So you kind of get over it, right? And then we just replaced their time. We help them learn how to fill their downtime. We help them learn how to not do anything sometimes, that was okay. Because kids right now, when they have a phone, and even with you and I, when we have our phone, with every little down moment, we tend to pick it up. And I wanted my kids to learn how to be comfortable in their own skin and not have to pick up a device every time there was some downtime. And so one of the boys during his downtime, if he started to get bored, he'd go out in the backyard and hit 100 baseballs off the tee, and he got really good at baseball. And that's how he spent his time. The other one used to run cross country, and that was a big thing. And he would practice and he would work on his mile time. And then they both play musical instruments. And so they really are very happy about the way they spend their downtime. And I am too, because the average child spends about 16,000 hours on a phone from middle school to high school. 16,000 hours is the average, because it's, 8 or 9 hours a day. It's a lot of hours that they spend on a screen. So when you take that 16,000 hours and you start doing other things with it, it's amazing, because they can learn so fast, and they can develop talents really much easier than they will ever be able to do for the rest of their adult life. Trust me, I still can't hit a baseball. I should have learned that when I was 10, but it's a gift. It's definitely a gift to give your kids. And trust me on the fact that they won't hate you for long. And if they hate you a little bit, then that's okay, because that doesn't bother me. And they don't really hate their parents at all, ever. But they'll have a fit, they'll have a temper fit, they'll get mad, and that's okay, because that's their job. Their job is to push back a little bit. But you're the coach, and you know what's best. So all I know is that life without having these certain specific types of screens is very doable, and it's really fun. Childhood is over in a blink of an eye, and they have the rest of their life to have to deal with it. And you know what? They don't learn how to use social media by being on social media when they're teenagers. They learn how to use social media and how to balance and use things well when they develop other things in their life before they have to depend on that.
Who else is doing good work in this area?
So I just worked with John Haidt on his book, The Anxious Generation. That is a fabulous resource to read through and learn about the mental health crisis and about the statistics and the research around how phones contributed to what we're dealing with today. We love the work of Victoria Dunkley. She wrote Reset Your Child's Brain. She's a medical doctor who wrote about how to detox your kids off. And that book is reaching its 10-year anniversary. I can't even believe it, because we've used that a lot for our families. Richard Fried is coming out with a fabulous book about persuasive design, and he wrote the book Wired Child. Now his new book is about persuasive design, and that's fabulous to understand for parents and, honestly, for kids to understand about the persuasive design. But those are some of the authors that we really love. Our organization sets the highest bar, no question. We are, I don't like to say we're strict. It's not about being strict. It's about setting a really high standard. And so I believe that if you don't have a high bar, right, then it's really hard to even reach your potential. So it's like with a coach who's got a baseball team, you want your team to hit home runs. Are they going to hit a home run every single game? Of course not. But that is your goal. So at ScreenStrong, we have a very high bar. We take the medical science and we lay it over the screen problem. And based on medical science, we give the recommendations. So there's not a whole lot of organizations that do that. There are more that are coming on board, but there are certainly a lot of other authors that are writing about it, writing about the risk and the benefits of screens in general and how are we going to do it. I think that the thing for me from where I sit after all the years that I've worked on this right now is I believe that people inherently feel like this is a really difficult problem and it's a really difficult subject to talk about. And I don't think it is. I think the answer is super simple and we're making it really complicated. I think we have to stop treating our kids like adults. They are not adults. Leonard Sachs, The Collapse of Parenting is a fabulous book to read. We need to embrace our kids and our teenagers right where they are and let them develop fully with each life stage. And it's not hard. I think we're making it a lot harder than it needs to be. The solution to so many things usually is the most simple path. And that's what we support at ScreenStrong.
Any last words for our audience?
My last words are be encouraged. If you're hearing all this for the first time today and it's kind of blowing your mind, don't get frustrated. Don't get overwhelmed. Just be super encouraged wherever you are right now in time. Things can get better. You can make changes. You don't want to look back. You know, a lot of people say, don't you feel so guilty over what happened to your oldest son? You know what I did for a season and then I got over it because you can't live in the city of regret where you're constantly regretting and you're saying, well, I already gave it to him. I can't take it back. Yes, you can. You can get in today. You can start right now and make a change. It is never too late. It's a lot easier when your kids are younger. Obviously, prevention is a lot better. But I just want to encourage everyone listening that if you're struggling with this issue, you are not alone. So many people are, but that we are here to help. We've got your back. We've done this with many, many families. We know how to walk you through. We have a 30-day detox. We have the student course. We have the parent course. We have the facts. We have the information. And I know for sure that life can be better. I have been there. I've struggled. I've made all the mistakes. And I just want to encourage you that you can turn it around and your kids can be better off. They can be happier. You can be closer. You can go rescue your kids. And we're here to help you do it. So I hope that's encouraging.
This was very impressive. This is the best exposition of the topic that I've heard. I've been studying this for 7 years now and speaking on it for years. So thank you.
Well,
You're
no,
welcome.
thank you. And if you have any other questions, I'd love.
Great. Well, I appreciate that. And we'll check out that forum you have because I think the parents appreciate the Q&A too. And just the support because as you said, so much of it is emotional and we do have to take that into consideration.